Shane was on a solo road trip across the country, trying to clear his head after a rough year. He loved the open road, the feeling of endless possibility, and the way the landscape changed with every mile. One evening, he decided to take a detour off the main highway, following a sign for a scenic route that promised breathtaking views. The views were indeed stunning at first, rolling hills and a vibrant sunset painting the sky. But as dusk turned to night, the road became narrower and less maintained, the trees growing thicker and closer to the asphalt. His GPS signal flickered and died, leaving him with only the faint glow of his dashboard and the high beams cutting through the inky blackness. He hadn't seen another car for what felt like hours. The air grew colder, and a strange, unsettling quiet settled over everything, broken only by the hum of his engine. Then, his headlights caught something in the distance, a hitchhiker. Shane usually didn't pick up hitchhikers, but something about this person made him pause. They were standing perfectly still by the side of the road, wearing a dark, old-fashioned coat and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured their face. Their arm was extended, thumb out, in a gesture that seemed almost frozen in time. As Shane drove closer, he slowed down, a mix of unease and a strange sense of obligation swirling inside him. He pulled up alongside them, and the figure slowly, deliberately, turned their head towards him. The hat still hid their features, but Shane could feel an intense, cold stare from beneath its brim. "Need a ride?" Shane asked, his voice sounding oddly small in the vast silence. A raspy, almost whispering voice replied, "Just a little further down the road." Shane hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the passenger door. The figure moved with an unsettling stiffness, opening the door and sliding into the seat. As they settled in, Shane caught a glimpse of something under the hat. Not skin, but something pale and almost translucent. And the smell that filled the car was old, like damp earth and forgotten things. They drove in silence for a while, the tension in the car thick and heavy. Shane kept glancing over, trying to catch a better look at his passenger, but they remained perfectly still, facing forward, their hats still obscuring their face. The whispering voice broke the silence again. "Turn here." Shane saw no turn, just a continuation of the dark, tree-lined road. "There's nothing here," he said, confused. "Trust me," the voice rasped, a hint of something cold and insistent in its tone. Against his better judgment, Shane slowed down, and to his astonishment, a faint, overgrown track appeared, barely visible through the trees. He turned onto it, the car bumping and swaying over roots and rocks. The track led deeper into the woods, the trees closing in until it was almost pitch black, his headlights barely penetrating the gloom. "Stop here," the passenger commanded. Shane slammed on the brakes. They were in a small clearing, surrounded by ancient gnarled trees. The air was even colder here, and the silence was absolute. The figure slowly opened the car door and began to step out. As they did, the hat finally slipped back, revealing what was beneath. There was no face, just a smooth, bone-white skull, with empty eye sockets that seemed to stare right through Shane. And then, a sound. Not a voice, but a dry, rattling laugh that echoed through the clearing, chilling him to the bone. The figure, now fully revealed as a skeletal form in the old coat, turned its head back towards Shane and pointed a long, bony finger directly at him. "You're next," it whispered, the sound seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Shane didn't wait. He threw the car into reverse, tires spinning wildly, and tore out of the clearing, not caring about the bumps or the scratches. He drove like a madman until he found his way back to the main road. The skeletal image and that chilling whisper burned into his mind. He never took a scenic route again, and to this day, he can still feel that cold stare and hear that dry, rattling laugh whenever he drives alone at night. It was late, probably past midnight, and the rain was really coming down. Josh was driving home on those dark, winding country roads, the kind where the trees hang over like a tunnel and there are no streetlights. His phone was dead, of course, and the radio was just static. Suddenly, his headlights caught something in the road, a figure. Josh slammed on the brakes, the car skidding a bit, and managed to stop just inches away. It was a person, standing perfectly still, facing away from him, in the middle of the lane. They were wearing what looked like old, tattered clothes, and their hair was long and wild. Josh honked, but they didn't move. He honked again, louder, and still nothing. A chill ran down his spine. He considered just driving around them, but something about their stillness, the way they were just there, made him hesitate. He got out of the car, his heart pounding against his ribs. The rain instantly soaked through his jacket. "Hey," he called out, his voice a little shaky. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" No response. As he got a little closer, he could make out more details. Their clothes were definitely old, maybe even antique, and they were barefoot in the muddy road. A weird, sweet, almost earthy smell hung in the air around them. Josh was about 10 feet away when he noticed something truly unsettling. Their head was slightly tilted, almost like they were listening to something only they could hear. And then, slowly, ever so slowly, their head began to turn. Not their body, just their head. It rotated on their neck, smoothly, unnaturally, until their face was looking directly at him. But there were no eyes, just empty, dark sockets where eyes should have been. And a wide, impossibly wide smile that stretched from ear to ear, revealing too many teeth. Josh didn't scream. He couldn't. He just froze, the rain plastering his hair to his face as that eyeless, smiling face stared into him. He knew, with a terrifying certainty, that whatever this was, it wasn't human, and it had been waiting for him. He has no idea how long he stood there, locked in that silent, horrific gaze, before he somehow found the strength to stumble back to his car, jump in, and speed away, not daring to look in his rearview mirror. He still doesn't know what it was, and he never drives on that road after dark anymore. But sometimes, when he's alone in the quiet, he can almost feel those empty sockets staring, and that impossibly wide smile. Lucy loved road trips. The open road, the changing scenery, the feeling of freedom. It was her favorite way to clear her head. This time, she was driving solo through a particularly remote stretch of desert, the kind where the towns are few and far between, and the cell service is non-existent. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, but also casting long, eerie shadows. She'd been driving for hours, listening to her favorite playlist, when she noticed something strange in her rearview mirror. A car way back, but it seemed to be following her. She shrugged it off at first, figuring it was just another traveler heading in the same direction. But as the miles passed and the darkness deepened, the car remained stubbornly behind her, always the same distance. Lucy started to feel a prickle of unease. She sped up a little, and the car behind her matched her pace. She slowed down, and it did too. Her heart began to beat a little faster. This wasn't normal. The road was completely deserted now. Just her car, and the relentless headlights in her mirror. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, just her imagination playing tricks in the dark. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Then, she noticed something even stranger. The car behind her didn't have its headlights on. Only its high beams were cutting through the gloom, blinding her when she checked her mirror. And as she looked closer, she realized the high beams weren't two distinct lights, but one long, unbroken beam, almost like a single, glowing eye. A shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't a car. It couldn't be. She pressed harder on the accelerator, her tires squealing slightly as she took a curve. The light behind her didn't waver. It was closer now, much closer, and she could hear a faint, low hum, not like an engine, but something else entirely. Lucy glanced in her rearview mirror one last time, her breath catching in her throat. The single, glowing eye was right there, filling her entire mirror, and in the center of that light, she saw it. A dark, shifting silhouette, vaguely humanoid, but with limbs that seemed too long, too thin, pressing against the windshield of whatever was chasing her. It wasn't driving a car, it was the car. She screamed, a raw, primal sound, and slammed on the brakes, swerving violently. The car spun, tires screeching, and she braced for impact. But there was nothing. When her car finally skidded to a halt, facing the opposite direction, the road behind her was empty. The single, glowing eye was gone. Shaking, Lucy managed to turn her car around and drive the rest of the way in a daze, constantly checking her mirrors. She never saw it again, but she never forgot that single, staring light in the darkness, and the terrifying realization that some things on the open road aren't always what they seem. She doesn't do solo road trips anymore. Jack and Josh, fueled by cheap energy drinks and an insatiable desire for adventure, decided a spontaneous late-night road trip was exactly what they needed. The destination? A ghost town 2 states over, famous for its eerie silence and abandoned mine shafts. They packed a cooler, made a questionable playlist, and hit the highway just as the moon was climbing high. The first few hours were classic road trip fun, singing off-key, telling bad jokes, and reliving old memories. As they ventured deeper into the night, leaving the glow of streetlights behind, the landscape began to change. The trees grew taller and denser, and the road, once a smooth ribbon of asphalt, became cracked and winding. Their GPS, which had been perfectly reliable, suddenly started acting up, displaying a chaotic jumble of lines, and then going blank. Just a dead zone, Jack shrugged, but a flicker of unease passed between them. They were deep in the wilderness now, the only light coming from their headlights, which seemed to struggle against the oppressive darkness. That's when they saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road, bathed in the red glow of their tail lights. It was a woman in a long white dress, her back to them, seemingly staring into the dense woods. Josh, ever the cautious one, suggested they keep driving. But Jack, with a sudden, uncharacteristic bravado, pulled over. "She might need help, Josh." As Jack rolled down the window, the woman slowly turned. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, though wide open, seemed to look through them rather than at them. A faint, sweet scent, like old roses, drifted into the car. "Can we help you?" Jack asked, his voice a little less confident now. The woman didn't speak. Instead, she slowly raised a hand, pointing a slender, unnaturally long finger directly at the back seat of their car. Jack and Josh exchanged a terrified glance. There was nothing in the back seat but their jackets and a half-eaten bag of chips. Yet, the woman's gaze was fixed there, unwavering. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air snaked up Josh's spine. "We should go," he whispered, his voice tight. Jack, unnerved by the woman's silent, unblinking stare, quickly put the car in drive and sped away, leaving the silent figure behind in the darkness. They drove for what felt like hours, not speaking, the silence in the car heavier than the night outside. The GPS magically flickered back to life, guiding them back to a main highway. It wasn't until they pulled into a brightly lit gas station, miles away from where they'd seen the woman, that they finally dared to look in the back seat. Tucked neatly between their jackets, almost as if placed there, was a single, dried white rose, its petals fragile and paper-thin, They never made it to the ghost town that night, and they never quite looked at late-night road trips the same way again. The rose became a silent, chilling reminder of the woman by the road and the inexplicable thing she had pointed to, or perhaps left for them. Steph, usually the most organized and sensible of her friends, had a sudden, inexplicable urge for a spontaneous adventure. Blame it on the full moon or a particularly boring week. But by 11 p.m. on a Friday, she'd convinced her two best mates, Liam and Chloe, that a drive to the coast, just to watch the sunrise, was an absolutely brilliant idea. They packed a thermos of coffee, a blanket, and a playlist that oscillated wildly between 90s pop and obscure indie rock. The energy in the car was buzzing as they left the city lights behind. The first couple of hours were exactly what Steph had envisioned. Laughter, singing along off-key, and that unique sense of freedom that only a late-night drive brings. Liam was expertly navigating the winding country roads, and Chloe was in charge of snacks, a duty she took very seriously. The plan was to reach a specific, secluded beach by 4 a.m., just in time for the first hint of dawn. However, around 2 a.m., things started to get a little weird. They were deep in a rural area, far from any major towns, when the car's engine began to sputter. Liam, usually calm under pressure, looked genuinely perplexed. "That's odd," he muttered. "I just had it serviced." The sputtering turned into a cough, and then, with a final groan, the engine died. They were stranded on a dark, deserted road, surrounded by silent fields and a sky full of indifferent stars. They tried everything, checking the fuel, jiggling wires, even a hopeful kick to the tire, but the car remained stubbornly lifeless. Just as a wave of frustration was about to wash over them, a faint, rhythmic thumping started from the field beside them. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, a steady, almost tribal beat. "Is that music?" Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. Steph, always the pragmatist, grabbed a flashlight. "Let's go see if there's a farmhouse or something," she suggested, though a shiver ran down her spine. Following the sound, they climbed over a rickety fence and ventured into the field. The thumping grew louder, and soon they could make out the flickering glow of a bonfire in the distance. As they got closer, they saw a group of figures, silhouetted against the flames, moving in a strange, slow dance. It wasn't a party. There was no talking, just the hypnotic beat and the swaying figures. Suddenly, one of the figures turned, and in the firelight, Steph saw a flash of something metallic and glinting in their hand. A primal instinct screamed at Steph to turn and run. "Okay, new plan," she hissed to Liam and Chloe, pulling them back. "We're going back to the car. We'll wait there." They scrambled back across the field, the rhythmic thumping seeming to follow them. They practically dove into the car, locking the doors and trying to catch their breath. The silence inside the vehicle was thick with unspoken fear. Just as they were about to despair, the car coughed, sputtered, and then, miraculously, roared back to life. Liam didn't hesitate. He put it in gear and sped away, leaving the thumping and the bonfire behind. They never looked back, and they never found out what was happening in that field. The sunrise they eventually saw from a much more populated beach felt less like an adventure and more like a hard-won escape.